you have to think of a public cloud as your virtual data center. You can't separate it out into, oh, it's running on their servers, or that's their responsibility. It's your virtual data center. And that was a telling moment, I think, for me.
Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. I'm Richard Simon. This is the December 2024 episode of Cloud State of Play. This is our final episode of the year, at least in the conventional format anyway. We kind of normally use the December episode as a review of the year, but I thought we'd kind of shake things up a little bit for this year. And give Paul a little more work to do, maybe. So we're going to be doing sorry, Paul. So we're going to be doing a Christmas special episode of Cloud State of Play. That will be our year in review episode. But for this December edition, I have the dazzling Paul Bevan. Back again for more punishment.
When you get to Z in the alphabet, I'd love to know how you're going to describe me when you get to the letter Z.
Yes, well, we'll see about that. I'm sure Copilot will come up with some more adjectives for you. Paul is the Director of Infrastructure Research at Law Research. Paul, how's it going?
It's going all right, thank you. Yourself, yeah?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to Christmas. Have you got all your Christmas cards sent out? All your presents already wrapped?
No. I've managed to get all the presents, but wrapped cards, nah.
Okay, so you're a bit like me, like a last-minute shopper.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. Okay. All right. So for this episode, we have the usual 3 topics that we're going to bring you, brand new topics. So for this month, we have chosen the following. First one is cloud networking, the undiscovered country. So that's all really about where the latest sort of is happening around cloud networking, what is cloud networking, and so on. So Paul and I are going to hopefully go through all of that with you and give you some of the latest updates. And we'll talk a little bit more about the details of kind of what's that all about a little bit later. The second one is called Stop Managing All Your Data. So this is continuing our obsession with data. And we've talked about all sorts of things. Even the last month we mentioned data. There was a data, what was it? A data design kind of thing that we did in architecture that we talked about, and various other ones like sovereignty and data sovereignty is someone that we've covered in the past. So this is continuing that, called Stop Managing All Your Data. Quite interesting to see what that's going to bring out. And then the third one is alternative public clouds. Are they just wishful thinking? So clearly Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are the big 3, but there are alternative public clouds. And it would be nice to actually explore some of those, see what kind of things that they offer, what services and so on, and how do they compare, and really what's kind of their role in the space, and also, quite importantly, where do they come from? What's kind of been their background and their history. All right, so Paul, let's go with the first one, cloud networking, the undiscovered country. I'll let you start off the conversation because you kind of wanted to explore this a little bit more. We have talked about it a little bit in the past, so we've kind of focused on a few things in the past, but I'll come back in after your first thoughts.
Yeah, cloud networking is sort of one of those areas. It's a bit like one of those sort of annoying itches. You can't quite get at it and scratch it properly. It's just in the wrong place. And it's something I've had that itch since about 2018. Back then I did a report. It was basically a sort of visibility, observability, systems management type report, AI ops, things like that, and got a number of companies involved. And the thing that came out, which was interesting back at that time, was a company called, which I've spoken about before, called Thousand Eyes, took part and actually scored very badly because actually they weren't really delivering this whole sort of end-to-end sort of system, approach, AI ops. It wasn't. But one thing that came out very, very strongly from that, it was interesting why the heck they actually got involved in the first place, but what it identified was that the vast majority of tools out there and vendors out there did not really provide any sort of observability and insight into what goes on inside public cloud networks.
Right.
So there was a gap, and more companies using public cloud, using the three big hyperscalers, effectively were flying blind.
Right. So Paul, just explain a little bit more about that point about sort of inside the public cloud network.
Once you get to the sort of front door of the public cloud networks and you step through, you very quickly lose the ability using traditional tools to see what's going on. And the main reason behind that is that it's a highly abstracted, it's software oriented environment, and they've abstracted everything away. So that's problem number one. And really, the whole idea in most network management tools is to track the IP addresses and what's going on at the IP address level. Well, when you get into a public cloud and it's software defined, it's abstracted, it's ephemeral, it's using containers, IP is almost no use at all. And in fact, what's happening is you're getting dynamic allocation of IP addresses, which can be up 1 minute and down the next and changed. And infrastructure as a code means that you're doing an awful lot of the network configuration in that sort of software development code environment. And so all the old network management tools have absolutely no idea what goes on inside that public cloud. So that's the challenge, and you can start to get some views using the basic sort of VPC flow logs you get from in CloudWatch or Azure Monitor or Stackdriver, but they don't give you the level of sort of granularity that you really need to understand what's going on. And it certainly doesn't give you the what's going on at the almost application layer either. And you see trying to link together, and all those services which are Kubernetes based or microservices based, they're so ephemeral. They're up and down like a yo-yo. So it's sort of trying to keep a track of that. And my perception has been in the last few years that most of the traditional vendors in that space have just literally decided, no, it's too much effort. I'm not going there. And therefore what you've got is a whole load of open source tools, whether it's, to help you put together some sort of observability into what's going on in the public cloud. And it's quite a difficult process. You're having to use, Terraform's used, Linkerd, there's all sorts of tools that you have to put together to give you that capability to see what's going on. So I think that's really, and people talk about full stack observability, FSO. And I've had to point out to people at times that really still doesn't include the ability to see what's going on at a service level, and linking the traffic to, what's going on. So I just, this idea it's the undiscovered country, I think is sort of quite interesting. So how do we do that? Now, you and I have come across, some tools like Aviatrix that help, and Terraform itself. If you actually put observability rules into the Terraform, as you basically build your CI/CD pipeline. It will help you. It will help you do that, but that's an awful lot of work. So it's interesting to see people like Thousand Eyes now getting to grips with that. And theirs was an interesting story because they moved from a monolithic application running in their own data centers. They completely redeveloped it to run on AWS in the public cloud. And it was their own engineers that discovered, actually, when they did that, they lost visibility into what was going on in the network. And given that's what their job was, the whole of Thousand Eyes raison d'etre is to help people see what's going on the internet and in the public cloud. They lost any ability to see what was going, so they had to sort the problem out themselves, and they've now developed, but I guess Netflix have done the same themselves, but don't want to, push that out as a service. Thousand Eyes have had to do it, and they've basically wrapped it up into a whole service they call Cloud Insights. Really interesting, linking all the services, mapping. You have to give Thousand Eyes your credentials to get in, so they can map your, if you like, the way in which your services hang together. And they can actually then, because of they track all the network going, they can track it all going across. And they've got the ability to correlate then. So as and when things change, they can, they're correlating that at all points in time. So you keep seeing there's almost like a level of persistence, if you like, to their ability to track what goes on with all those certain new services and how it's operating over the public cloud. So, and I think from my perspective, it was really just trying to get people to understand there's an awful lot of work to be done to make true observability, and just, depend on the level of risk. If you're not too bothered, I suppose that's the right word, about, if I lose it, if performance degrades or I lose it for a little while in the public cloud. I think what you have to realize is it's your responsibility. You can't hand it over and think, oh, I'm gone to the public cloud, it's all AWS or it's all GCP or whatever. I think you need to take that one on board. And the thing we haven't talked about, you might want to come back to, is that the challenge as well is not so much just doing it with the service. You've now got to do that across multiple clouds at times. So how do you connect, and when they've got slightly different APIs or slightly different ways of doing things. So again, the tools have got to do it. And again, people like Thousand Eyes will be looking at that. Their first implementation of Cloud Insights is AWS. But there will be others coming down the line. And the trick will be, how do I get that to work across the piece? And again, you're probably aware of some of the tools that are available out there that are trying to stitch that together, and others that claim they can do. And I think it is an undiscovered, it's a journey everybody's on. And I don't think we're there as to how, how close we've got to being perfect, but there's a lot better observability into public clouds. But it takes a bit of effort if you want to do it yourself. And the reality is an awful lot of vendors have not got the will or the time or the inclination to do a lot of that themselves. So there are a few. So you're having to go to, tools like Aviatrix or iSurveillance and all those and put it together. And so it's a difficult time. So I think when you start to get one or two vendors coming along that really start to put it together and can physically map through the public cloud, through that sort of ephemeral service-oriented architecture up, that and infrastructure as a code piece is going to be something very, very valuable. But I think that's the main thing. I hadn't realized, and again, this is my lack of knowledge, that, IP addresses were not very useful once you're inside the public cloud.
Yeah.
And I had to ask the question, what about the internet? And the internet still works on fixed IP addresses.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, people will be going, didn't you know that? But I've been sort of working this, why was it so difficult? And this idea, and it was one of the Thousand Eyes guys said, you have to realize, it's the network is in this sort of software-defined infrastructure as a code world. You have to think of a public cloud as your virtual data center. You can't separate it out into, it's running on their servers, or it's, that's their responsibility. It's your virtual data center. And that was a telling moment, I think, for me.
Yeah, excellent. So let's um let's circle back to that one because there's something interesting that I'll mention to you. I think it's important. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points. So you mentioned traditional vendors. So are we talking more about and there's actually lots of stuff here to unpack, but on that point that you mentioned, were you referring to, and just briefly on that, were you referring to like the observability vendors that we've kind of used to, like the Dynatraces, the
Yes,
Datadogs, and
yes is the
right?
answer to that.
Okay, right. Because you mentioned, I mean, yes, all the public cloud providers, cloud service providers, hyperscalers. I'm having to call them hyperscalers these days because that's what we
It's the
kind of call
easy.
them for. Well, I call them that for work, so I'm used to that now. So all the hyperscalers, cloud service providers, the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Google, the big three, for example, and all the other ones. Everybody has their own tools, right? So you can kind of go and, as you said, kind of stitch things together, API into, script around, kind of their own tools if that's what you kind of want to do, and yeah, include it as part of your infrastructure as code or your SRE activities or cloud ops activities, whatever you're essentially doing, and you can certainly do that. There is those other sort of more traditional sort of observability vendors, so the Dynatraces, Datadogs of the world, and so on. So we can also go to them for kind of an overall, is my service up and running? Is my Kubernetes cluster up and running? Has it gone down? Kind of thing approach as well. But because we're in this sort of SDN world, software defined networking
Yeah.
world now, as you said, there, and yes, and the likes of iSurveillance with Cilium, their solution, eBPF obviously being the underlying technology, the extended Berkeley packet filter technology being part of that. They kind of dig deep and very quickly into that sort of user and kernel space traffic. So it's really very intricate in the application, the service, the container, the Kubernetes cluster, the service mesh. So it's kind of encroaches into the sidecar proxies for how you do a service mesh, for example. So the the Istios, the Linkerd's of the world, which is a kind of a sidecar approach. eBPF offers a sidecar less approach to that, right? So, but that's, as we said, that kind of is within your cloud bubble. That's within your cloud environment that you've carved out in AWS, Azure, whatever, right? But it's not kind of giving you, okay, but what happens when I traverse out of that cloud bubble that I have and into the greater SDN of AWS, let's say, and then to the outside world? How much visibility do we get there? And I think you mentioned before that Thousand Eyes had realized that, and that was the bit that they were trying to get more into. Was I correct in understanding that?
I mean, they were, well, no, the bit that they were late into was the bit you've just been describing.
Oh, okay. So the other way around, coming
Other way
into.
around. So they've
Right.
already done the other bits. So, for example, they have completely instrumented the internet, the global internet.
Yeah. Okay. But what about the traditional vendors then? Because I don't have enough visibility of what Dynatrace, for example, Datadog, and so on can actually do. We do know like Aviatrix, Megaport, and some of those types of vendors are in that what I would call a cloud network management space, which is the overall space. They may not be kind of getting into the Cilium and eBPF level of stuff, but they can give you network policy, network management, and a kind of that overall view. So I would maybe put them in the Thousand Eyes kind of space, maybe. Would that be correct? And maybe kind of putting, Aviatrix and Megaport
Yeah,
into
so
that space?
I mean, yeah, they're very specific capabilities within that. I think what Thousand Eyes are doing is using that sort of capability, whether I mean, I don't know how much I drop a minute here, but obviously iSurveillance, for example, has been bought by Cisco,
Yeah,
and Thousand Eyes is part of Cisco as
as
well.
well. Yeah.
And so I did ask them the question about how much interaction there was going on between themselves and iSurveillance. Yeah, there was a sort of awkward shuffling going on in the
I
background,
couldn't answer that one for you.
and it was, and I think that's, this is a different challenge we might have in another CSOP is what's it like when you're bought by a bigger organization with lots of different pieces, and how do you make it work?
I think there'll be some more awkward silences in that one, Paul.
Yeah, but I think it takes time. I really do think it
Oh
takes time
yeah, 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 yeah.
to get going. And to an extent, Cisco have allowed the individual component parts to keep on working and doing their own thing without destroying them completely.
Mhm.
Um, but you look at what Thousand Eyes are doing, and you're thinking, well, you've now got more of the tools within inside your own corporate organization. Why aren't you talking to them? And again, that was so they've picked up on the ability to do that, whether that's with iSurveillance, maybe embarrassingly, they've used somebody else's tool set, they're having to go, so I don't know.
Yeah,
But basically, I see aviatrix and iSurveillance and others like that as being some of the component parts that you as an end user organization could go and stitch together yourself. And Thousand Eyes is more like an organization, okay, underpinning everything. They've instrumented the whole of the sort of public cloud and internet environment. They've got these probes and agents everywhere. It's amazing what you can see is basically taking all these capabilities and layering it over the top into a service, a software as a service that you can use. So it takes away from you. So I think they've had to use the sort of tools and capabilities that Aviatrix and iSurveillance and others have got, but they've layered it into a service that an end user organization can say, "Oh, right, I don't have to do that myself now."
yeah,
However, and this you could probably help me here, is I still feel as when you're in your sort of continuous development environment and you're using something like Terraform, you're still going to have to think about how you want observability to work as it starts to go out across that public cloud network, and therefore build that into a Terraform, capability.
I think, yeah, I think what you would do when you're in that infrastructure as code and what you're really um, creating as you're creating your sort of cloud environment is not the not the intricacies of that, because I would expect that from Thousand Eyes and Aviatrix, for example.
Yeah.
I and you know that kind of code is coming in, that infrastructure code is coming in at the policy level. So if you're going to implement
Yeah.
certain types of policies as policy as code, then you would have that as part of your Terraform script, CloudFormation script, whatever it is that Ansible, whatever you're using. So I'd expect it, to call Open Tofu as it is now. It would come in at that level in terms of a policy that is already has been decided and is being dictated by the likes of Aviatrix and Thousand Eyes from higher above, and then below is the Cilium eBPF, because that's really at the cluster level, at the Kubernetes cluster service mesh level, which in that sort of network stack, if you like, is below all of this stuff. So I'm looking at it as someone like Megaport, and there's other people in that, maybe NTT Data and others. Megaport at that sort of, let me stitch up the global network for you because I have the CDNs and whatever, and I can stitch it. And I'm a partner of AWS and people like that, and I can stitch it up at that sort of global level. You can come in through me and API through me. Then when it comes to monitoring from the gateway down to your cloud environment, it's the Thousand Eyes and Aviatrix types, because they can give you that end to end.
Yeah.
And then when you're intricately into your Kubernetes cluster and your service mesh and so on, then it's Cilium and eBPF that's doing that. So,
but again, somebody's got to bring that back up into a single view. That's where I think
good luck with that. Yeah.
that's where I think Thousand Eyes are heading. And I say I call
Yeah.
it a journey because I think that's where they're headed.
Yeah. And it should, all of them should also then figure pipe, because Thousand Eyes will, is not going to do like your containers and DevOps and, all right. So it should then, the likes of Aviatrix, the likes of Thousand Eyes, and even Megaport to a point, certainly Cilium will do it, and eBPF will do it. But those slightly higher levels should then integrate into your observability platform or whatever tool you've chosen to be your systems monitoring, your monitoring tool for the cloud. And if we take the observability players at their word in terms of what they've done over the last few years, they've integrated observability with AI ops, with APM, application performance monitoring. All of those guys converged together. All those services, all those players converged together a few years ago. And I think you and I mentioned this in the previous episodes. So if we take them for their word, then we should be integrating all of this stuff into their tools to give us that one view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, but there's been a sort of, it feels a bit like a sort of code of silence when it comes to that piece we've been talking about today. We talk about the undiscovered country, and it varies. It's almost worse with the old style network performance management tools. They really are still, wedded to individual IP addresses, I think, at times, But even the likes of, the Dynatraces of this world, the Splunks or whatever, there's this, and there's still this sort of, they talk very broadly about, yes, I've got end-to-end visibility. Well, you've sort of got a gap in the middle where you're making an assumption that because something's not working, let's say, from an end user digital experience point of view, or and you don't appear to have got any problems with your server management and all the tools that are looking at what's going on at the sort of hardware level. You're making assumptions about where it is and what the problem is. One of the things that they found, the Thousand Eyes guys found when they were developing their new application was that a lot of the problems they started to identify were basically configuration change problems. Very little goes wrong on the physical devices in the AWS or the GCP or the Azure networks. There will be problems, but occasionally, but very, very rarely. The majority are things you've built into configuration changes because you've abstracted the code away from the hardware itself. And those are what's causing the problem. And if that happens inside that public cloud, you've got to be able to see it.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem comes. So I think an awful lot of the observability providers, the people who I would have said were, the old BMC environments and I mean, BMC's come a long way on, I have to say. They're quite impressive. But fundamentally, they don't understand that piece in the middle and have sort of ignored it.
Yes.
I mean, they'll have people saying it, but I think they've ignored it. And so they will talk blithely about network management, but it's the network management either side of the cloud network.
Yes. Yeah. And I think if the observability vendors are going to be that sort of central focus, which I think they have seemed to position themselves over the last few years. As we said, they've combined, we had separate players for observability, we had separate players for AI ops, we had separate players for application performance monitoring, APM. But now they're all together. Turbonomic claims they do everything. Splunk claims they do everything. Moogsoft claims they do everything. Dynatrace claims they do everything. Datadog, Sysdig, they all talk about the same stuff. Oh, we do it all. We do AI ops, we do APM, we do observability, we do all of that. Yes, but that's not the only things. You have to do this so-called cloud network management. You have to do this cloud security. You even have to do FinOps. You
Yeah.
have to bring in Advia stuff, Aptio stuff into into your platform as well. You can't, even if you're not going to do it yourself, you have to say we integrate with Aptio, we integrate with iSurveillance, Cilium, for that low level kind of
Yeah.
cluster service mesh stuff, Kubernetes cluster service mesh stuff, and so on. You can't just say, oh well, we just do observability and yeah, we do AI ops and we tick a few boxes and that's it.
Yeah. And I think
Because look at it from the customer's perspective. I've got to have Dynatrace. I got to have Aviatrix. I got to have Cilium. I mean, how many UIs am I looking at here?
well, I mean, to an extent, that's always been the case. I mean, we've been trying to get enterprises to reduce the number of tools that they use, and obviously individual teams have their favorite tools, won't give them up. They'll die on the hill, defending their tools. And it has been a challenge to get people to go to a sort of single system. And sometimes, just having the best you can almost do is to say, let's have a central monitoring, pane of glass. I mean, I'm not sure that single pane of glass is a term that everybody hates or loves or whatever, but fundamentally,
overused, definitely.
it's overused. But fundamentally, the point at which all the integrations come together, so you can see and make the assessments, and so there's some great single panes of glass out there that still don't have that bit integrated into them that Cilium and Aviatrix and the others provide. And it's that bit, I think, we were talking about the undiscovered country, is these guys are out there, prospecting and not quite the Wild West, but you know what I mean. They're out, leading the way, trying to find out how we need to do this. And we're on that journey. And I just think some of the observability, the more traditional observability vendors and the network management people need to own up about that and say, look, yeah, it is a problem. And if I'm going to really enable customers to get a genuine end-to-end visibility, a genuine end-to-end ability to say, it's about assurance. It's how do I assure the business that it ain't going to fall over, or it ain't, if it does fall over, I can know where it's happened quickly.
Yeah, I can trace every single
Correct.
packet, every single API request, blah 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 blah, everything end to end.
Everything. If you're a mission critical system that's running in the public cloud and you can't say that, you're at risk.
Yeah, and ideally to do it from one interface, but okay, maybe you have to use a couple of tools or 3 or 4 tools.
Yeah, you might have to use a few tools, but at some point you've got to have a central correlation and working out, okay, where's this happening and why is it happening and what do we need to do about it?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the message of the likes of Moogsoft when they were kind of positioning themselves as kind of the AI ops. Bring Dynatrace, bring Datadog, bring SysDig, bring everything. Clouds, whatever. All of those tools into Moogsoft for AI ops capability. Okay, so one last point, which I said we'll circle back to. So you talked about sort of the IP addresses and so on. So this is probably one of 2 points that HashiCorp really did very well at at putting out as a message. Clearly, it was very sort of focused because it was focused on their solutions. And their solutions kind of operate in this space, but they did make this distinction between how sort of your traditional data center works versus how a cloud environment works. So their so-called cloud operating model, which is not really a cloud operating model, it's just their kind of excuse for bringing in a number of their types of services and solutions. They talked about in the data center we have a kind of a static IP address environment. Everything's hard coded. You have we focus more on the on the hosts. So the host server that runs your email, the host server that runs your database, the host server that runs your blah blah application, and so on. In cloud, we don't really do that. We focus on the service that the application or cluster is providing to us. So networking and IP, that kind of static sort of approach really falls away. And as you said, things are ephemeral and they will change and whatever, they reboot and things like that. So what actually gels that together is a so-called service registry, where every service registers itself at the service registry. And then if I'm an app and I need a database, the service registry points me in the right direction. And then I go with my credentials, I go and negotiate, with that service to make use of it and so on. How I do that is the other part of it, which is the security part. So again, we used to talk about, admin accounts and service accounts and Active Directory and stuff like that. And again, we used to, unfortunately, hard code those in, sometimes actually have them just in plain text files as well, which goes back to what we were talking about last month, about exposed secrets and so on. So that's where that aspect of it is now replaced with a secrets manager. So things like HashiCorp Vault or some of the other tools out there will actually offer that activity, the security, the encryption, and even backwards compatibility with AD. So it will actually integrate with your Active Directory, because your, not, or your misbehaved application, which you've just, migrated into the cloud, doesn't know anything about cloud, and it's expecting to, talk to an Active Directory. So it will actually act as a conduit for your old crappy monolithic application. They're still expecting a service account or an admin account to get itself, get its act together. The secrets manager, HashiCorp Vault, or one of the other tools out there, will actually do that for you. Okay, so we'll actually go back and talk to your AD and give that, communicate in the same way that the application understands. So it thinks it's actually still talking to Active Directory. Of course, you can kind of bring it into Azure, AD and things like that. But the point being is that that's kind of what a secrets manager does. And obviously it does beyond that. Like I said, it gives you that, it holds your credentials, your keys, your tokens. It generates the, temporary IAM that you can have. Because as we said, cloud is a zero trust environment. So really you shouldn't give anything out that just lasts forever, as we used to do in the castle and moat approach of the data center.
No, it's a whole. I mean, that's a whole topic in its own right, I think, and certainly one we haven't sort of covered properly today. That's for sure. But I mean, I think that's absolutely true. One of the things that's coming out of this too is, do we need a greater cooperation on standards and APIs and things? Because you just said that was HashiCorp's own version, and again you get into this thing, and this is a cyclical thing within the industry, is that you come up with something new and it takes a while to get a level of standardization between them. And I think cloud networking is another one where it's going to have to be, even between the big hyperscalers, some level of standardization of interfaces and the ways you put these things together. Otherwise, you will constantly end up with separate sets of tools. And obviously this sort of lingering, oh my God, am I locked into HashiCorp? Am I locked in? There's always seems to be a lock-in somewhere, because we haven't got really an completely open set of standards that people plug into.
Yeah, I think what they tend to do in open source and sort of cloud native is that they all go in a particular direction, but they don't all necessarily take the same road.
Yeah.
To that in that direction. But generally speaking, these things are sort of universally known. So things like a service registry, a secrets management, like JFrog and people like that do things like all of these sort of things as well. And they deal with things like repositories. So we talk about code repositories and image repositories. And again, that's a universal sort of understanding and sort of agreement, but it's not necessarily a standard. if you like, everybody kind of does their own sort of versions, of that, and so on, unless they're based on an open source project. So unless they're based on Git, for example. So if you're based on Git, then your GitLab, your GitHub, your all of these Git kind of repositories, right? And they all use the same code base, but obviously the enterprise versions give you a lot more features.
I'm not sure any medium-sized enterprise business managers will be tuning into this, but you'd sort of look at them and they'd go, what the bloody hell have I got to do all that? In the old days they would have gone and bought an application.
Yeah.
They would have bought not an app. I mean, one of those old applications, monolithic application. It did what it did for them, and then we're now saying, no, you're going to have to do all this stuff. Because maybe we ought to be looking at what SaaS services are there out there, and what SaaS applications are out there that have actually used all the things we've been talking about to make a genuinely, excellent experience in a public cloud environment.
Yeah, I think there is.
They're out there.
Yeah, I think there is some abstraction in regards to that. I think that sort of SaaS solution, and a lot of these kind of vendors in this space, like I said, have been, offering, I think, sort of SaaS solutions, SaaS versions of their tools.
Yeah,
obviously, not everybody wants to do that. Some people want to hand knit it themselves.
Yeah, but the question is, have they done it in such a way that you can monitor it easily across that piece of the public cloud that we're talking about?
Yeah. So
that would be my question.
Yeah.
As the old cynic in the room.
Indeed. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. So the second topic is stop managing all your data. This was actually an interesting post that I picked up from a chap called Keith Coe. I have no idea who Keith Coe is. I don't normally tend to look up kind of who they are and what they're doing, who they work for. So I'm not really kind of trying to promote anything or whatever. It's really more interesting in terms of what they say. So this was a post, I think, that came up on LinkedIn, which I thought was quite interesting. Again, continuing our obsession with data, and in this case, sort of how you really deal with your data. So we've talked about cloud data management, data sovereignty, data fabric, data mesh in the past, and so on. So I thought we'll kind of look at this because it was kind of almost saying something which is taboo, which is don't store and don't hoard all your data. So that's why I thought it was a really interesting kind of approach in terms of how we how we look at things. And he produced, I mean, the post itself has kind of got some various information on it that he goes through, but he also produced a chart which I thought was quite interesting. And he starts with sort of enterprises or businesses kind of hemorrhaging value and not realizing it, and then kind of spending a lot of cost on poor decisions and missed insights and lost information, generating or errors creeping into sort of your sort of how you really deal with the overall data, I guess. And then he kind of gives some action plan sort of approach, and there's a big chart that he provides as well. Well, what was kind of your take on all of
that? I suppose I was sort of wryly amused in the sense that what he was, you always feel he's trying to boil the ocean here because, just let's go back to sort of basics. And a lot of what he talked about was really very, very sensible in terms of, how we should approach it. I mean, the first one is, assessing what data you've got is going to be, quite a challenge for organizations. I mean, there are tools out there, but most organizations I've come across really, because either data's siloed or, they're not really thought about, the quality of the data. So, I mean, I'll provide the link to the Blur site. I mean, Blur is much more well known for data than it is for my infrastructure practice. I mean, they've been around doing data for years, and there's some really interesting stuff that people ought to have a look on there. And this has been going on for decades. That the issue's not new. We don't we don't value data because we don't understand the difference between data and information.
Mm. Yeah.
We need good information, yes, but to do that, you need, oh, we've got loads of data. Yes, you have, but you don't know where it all is.
And hence why most people still call it data. They don't call it information, right? Data management and
Yeah,
data mesh.
we call about data management, but it's interesting. Businesses talk about information.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And they say, I need better information. I don't need more data.
Yeah.
Um,
And there is a distinction, Paul, as well, between, you know, the data aspect of it and how you manage and deal and observe that and so on, versus the getting information out of it, right? The
yeah,
quality aspect.
yeah. But it's, it was just as in a development environment, you say, if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out.
Yeah.
Well, if your data's rubbish and you use that, you'll get a rubbish response out the far end. And people haven't made that sort of connection. They've almost got this sort of, well, it's there. I can use that data, and it's almost like, oh God, I'll clean it if I have to. There's an element of, and again, we were talking, I think, in the last session about, don't duplicate data, don't move it twice, don't, do all those things with it. And we've done that so many times. If you look at most organizations, they've got so much duplicated data. That's number one. It's in silos, number two. And number three is a lot of the quality of the data itself it's not good. People have missed bits out on, any which way you look at it. So when I was looking at his chart, I mean, you had sort of nodded your head, said, yeah, you absolutely need to do that. You need to do that. But it's sort of, it's one of those, I talked about boiling the ocean. I think for most people, it'd be like, where do I start?
Yeah.
Where do I, and so, yes, go assess what you've got. So maybe we need to look at what are the tools that can go out and do data discovery and data profiling and data cataloging, and there are all sorts of tools that go out and do it. Um, but there is an underlying question in what he was talking about is, can you define what's important data to you? I think most business people will tell you what information is important to them, but they won't be able to tell you what data is important to them. So I think there's maybe a translation role between the data scientists and the business managers that sort of says, if you need that sort of information, if you need this sort of revenue information or that, customer satisfaction information, so it's almost like work back the other way.
Yeah.
Work back the other way just to get to a point where you can say, yeah, I've got everything oh God, I've got a gap here, I've got a gap there.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So obviously, and throwing something in, like, as you and I've recently noticed at the Big Data London event that we attended, and there's going to be lots of stuff on that, by the way. So review and a couple of talks as well from Big Data London. So look out for that on the channel. But there we noticed things like data observability. Now that's fine from now on, but that doesn't help you with what you've already got. You can kind of do the quality thing and whatever for data that's being generated and captured from now on, but not necessarily your old data.
And there are tools you can use to go back and find it and catalog it and profile it and do everything. But it is a commitment that you have to make.
Yeah. Yeah. So and by the way, I'll try and make the chart visible at some point, or I'll certainly include a link in the description of the video to the actual post and all the details. But we'll also try and maybe put that up on the screen if I can. But so if we kind of just go through the chart, so it kind of says most businesses, as we said, kind of lose value collecting endless files without a strategy. It costs, it's cost their business more than you think. So, time wasted on that, poor decisions being made, missed insights, lost information, increased errors. So I guess that's kind of, data accuracy and security compromises as well. So the solution, according to the post and the chart, is not managing more data, but managing the right data. So this, I think, was the kind of the controversial bit, which I said earlier, is kind of because everybody just hoards everything that they do, even logs and things like that. Nobody, dares to kind of just do metadata on something. No, I've got to keep the original logs, especially if you're kind of in, regulatory sort of, markets and things like that. And then it does provide an action plan. And as you said, I think that's, largely sensible kind of, steps that you can take. But clearly it needs kind of, okay, so how do I do that is maybe the next step. It says assess what you have. Okay. So evaluate your data, only keep what truly belongs on your servers. But even just that box itself, not only is the how do I do that, what tools do I go and get, but that's a huge undertaking in itself.
Yeah.
And that could last years doing that. As you said, location of the data, the integrity of the data, the accuracy of the data, and the value of the data, and who gets to make those value decisions. You have to kind of almost like put a squad of people together from various parts of the organization that will be your sort of data center of excellence or something that will, arbitrarily make those decisions.
You've got chief data officers.
Or unilaterally, I should say, make those decisions.
Yeah, you've got chief data officers, but it's got to come back to what information do I need to run my business?
Yeah.
I mean,
so who makes that decision of keeping that data and then, relegating other data or removing, eliminating other data?
But this way, back to you need, just as we've always struggled in the sort of development world to sort of bring the business user together with the developer to, and it's the old cartoon of the kids on the swing and trying to build the best possible swing, and they end up using a tire, a rubber tire. You've seen the cartoons over the years. I think we've got the same problem here. Is that you're saying, you've got to get people to make that jump between the technical side and the business side. And so, it's almost like, when you had fourth generation languages, it was supposed to be the time at which you could get a tech savvy business user and a business savvy tech user to come together with this sort of single language that they understood. And I think there's something similar here. How do you get from that point that says, okay, if that's the information you need, what's the data that needs to go in it? What data have we got and what's the gap? So rather than trying to go left, rather than shifting left and going left and saying, right, let's start with all you've got, is go to the board and say, what information do you need to run your business? There'll be some things in there like regulatory compliance that says, how long do I keep it and all those sort of things. I mean, it's interesting because I bet you find that most regulations say I need to keep this data for X years. I'd love to go around companies and find out, whether at the end of that time they simply go, all right, can that now, because I don't need it. And I suspect the answer will be partly because data is quite cheap. Actually data storage is relatively cheap in the scheme of things. And if it's data as opposed to pictures and, God knows what else, then it's probably not going to cost very much. But
we're generating so much nonsense these days as well.
Oh yeah, and the other thing, of course, that's going to drive a very different discussion is IoT.
Yeah,
all
AI.
And AI. But if you think about IoT, is that all these sensors out there are capturing huge amounts of data. And 80% of it probably doesn't need to go anywhere. And can be got rid of as soon as it's sense and respond. As soon as the response comes in, you can get rid of that data.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I think that probably kind of takes you towards streaming event-driven platforms and metadata and so on. Just
Yeah,
want to come back to those 5 boxes in terms of here's your action plan on the chart that
yeah,
he puts up. So he says assess what data you have. So if I mean, I guess we could look at this, like I said, from a what you already have and kind of the past history of data that you've generated, but clearly we also need a plan for sort of going forward. We can't just keep going back and fixing what we had, because that gets you into a perpetual sort of vicious cycle, if you like. So assess what you have, evaluate your data, only keep what truly belongs on your only keep what truly belongs on your servers. Okay, that's interesting. It's a choice of words. So I guess that's kind of where that sort of CDO and your data center of excellence, if you want to call it that, just coining a phrase, would really come in to kind of look at what you have. The next few, cut the digital clutter. That is the next one. Says use tools to spot redundant. So that's kind of dedupe, right? That's kind of looking at deduping tools and things like that. Because just putting out this advice, I think, is not enough. You need to kind of maybe go a further level down and say, yeah, so you'd use deduping tools, to basically do that, to get rid of that. That has its own problems, but we won't go into sort of what those are, because that's maybe another discussion. Then the next one says focus on high impact data. So turn raw data into insights that drive smart decisions. So this and the next one, which is build smart systems, create a modern data architecture that scales with your needs. I think AI in general and generative AI kind of coming in to a lot of existing tools. So things like an SQL Server, for example, where potentially I think in the future is that you'll be able to talk to SQL Server or Oracle database using natural language, not SQL queries anymore, and then ask it to generate whatever you want and correlate and cross-reference and compare and contrast and whatever, any of the data that you have in those databases. So I think that type of stuff would certainly help in this kind of raw data space, and then kind of the more modern, data architecture. The same one, I think, build smart systems, where it says the modern data architecture. And then into the next one, the next action, which is create clear ownership. I think that is where things like a data mesh comes in. The ownership, you owning your own data in your own silo, but it's federated and it's kind of centrally managed and governed and secured, and the access to it is kind of dealt with in that level, and then the presentation is provided as on a presentation level universally as well. So I think that's kind of where the likes of data mesh would potentially come in. At least that's kind of my sort of high level. But again, still a little bit deeper than what I'm seeing in the action plan, because the action plan is quite extremely high level. And like I said earlier, it just leaves me open with okay, but how do I do that? What is the tools? What, are you referring to dedupe when you say cut digital clutter? Do you mean a data mesh when you say create clear ownership, and so on?
Well, I might talk to my colleagues and see whether there's a sort of link that they can build between the two. Because if you go onto the Blur site and then look at the data expert site part of it, most of the tools you've just been talking about are all described there in some detail. This is what it does, where it sits. We tend to categorize things in different ways. Data as an asset, data in motion, data at rest, those sort of areas. But and then the challenge, of course, is that the tools tend to overlap between the so that you will see them. So it might be interested. I mean, we tried to do a mapping. A cloud mapping exercise, and it nearly killed us. And I was going to say this data mapping exercise might kill us as well, because there is an awful lot of overlap between the tools when you try and do it. But nonetheless, I mean, the basic ideas are right there, but it is the next is what is available. I'll let people go and have a look on the Bloor site and see what they think.
Yeah, yeah. Just final sort of parting shot is that I picked up another article on the news stack called "Who is the bigger villain? Data debt versus technical debt." So, I mean, that's kind of comparing it with something else, but again, that's quite interesting in regards to data debt being kind of or data in general being another sort of villain that we have to deal with. Okay, so the chart is there. Paul, you're going to provide us some more stuff from Bloor
Yep.
in the space. So
Yep.
do check out the description. All the links will be in the description of this video. Like I said, I'll offer the chart. I'll offer the connection to the LinkedIn post as well. So the link to the LinkedIn post as well. All of that will be in the description of the video. Cool. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Let's move on to our third topic, which is alternative public clouds. Are they just wishful thinking? Paul, what's your kind of immediate take on
that? I think I look at it in two ways. It's probably wishful thinking that they are going to seriously dent the hyperscalers market. I just don't think that's going to happen. But I think, is there a role for them? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are one or two key things you sort of look at when you look at, what are the things that they're sort of trying to position themselves on. And I mean, the obvious one is data sovereignty and the whole sort of issue of, security of your data in a local environment, which I think they all play on quite heavily. The other one that's interesting, and is that they've really all put a real push on the simplicity of the pricing model. Mm-hmm. They've all sort of linked into the fact that actually there is that many things you can do on AWS and GCP and Azure that it's confusing. And so, a novice like me looking at the websites of AWS, you lose the will to live trying to, work your way through it. Whereas you go on to some of these, websites of these guys, and they've got a very, what appears to be at first a quite simple message about transparency of pricing and simplicity of pricing. So there's, those are the two. The third thing that I picked up on looking at all the sort of smaller cloud was that they've come from a very different background. If you look at OVH Cloud, you look at Civo in the UK or Ionis in Germany or and others. All the one common theme is they were all web hosting companies.
Right.
That's where they came from.
Right.
They might have changed their name and they might have assimilated one or two other, but they've come from a web hosting environment, and they've got quite large bases of small and medium-sized enterprises.
Yeah.
So for the small and medium-sized enterprises, in terms of moving from web hosting to hosting servers to cloud, is a sort of no-brainer step. It's the relationships are there, they're local. The pricing seems to be fairly simple, and they're claiming they're cheaper. We haven't done enough work probably to look and say, are they really cheaper?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on that point specifically, and I'll just come back to some of the earlier points as well, but just on that point specifically, is it cheaper because you're doing more simplistic things on these alternative clouds and you're buying a very specific package? Because in a public cloud, you got all sorts of crazy services and stuff that you can make use of, so you can go a bit wild on various things and experiment and innovate and so on. Whereas in these clouds, I mean, there's certainly none of that kind of, bedrock type, Amazon Bedrock, AWS Bedrock type of thing, or, sort of, Azure's sort of AI and open AI and all the studios around that, all the development tools, and you're not going to get that. It's just not going to happen.
No.
right? And as we said, it's they can't compete at that level. And then, as I was going to say, one of the other subheadings for me was, is competing against Amazon, Microsoft, and Google a waste of time, really? So is it because, are they cheaper? And there are, I mean, there are certain things you can pick out. So, for example, Civo, my understanding, I could be wrong, but my understanding from what I was told earlier this year when I actually interviewed the CEO of Civo at the State of OpenCon conference, SUCON conference, one of the differentiators for them was that the control plane of Kubernetes clusters is not something that they charge for. So their XKS service, or whatever Kubernetes service, versus the AKS, EKS, GKE type of services from the big three, they don't charge for the control plane, only the nodes in your Kubernetes cluster. So that's, I mean, if that's still around as an option, then that's distinguishing yourself, and that would potentially make it cheaper. But is it cheaper, as we said, because they offer only certain types of services? You can't go wild and experiment with all these other things and rack up your bill as you might do in the public cloud, as well as you get this email package, you get this DevOps package, you get this, I don't know, file management package, or Microsoft Office, or 365 package, or whatever type of thing, and you're just purchasing those types of services that are very contained, specific, is very packaged and wrapped up.
I think if you look at instance pricing, server instances, storage instances, etc., some of them look cheaper than AWS and Microsoft Azure and GCP. They do on a per instance basis. But I mean, I did quite a lot of work with OVH Cloud over the last few years, and they were very slow to start delivering the sort of wraparound services, the platform as a service piece. They were hosters, and they're very, very efficient at using from an infrastructure as a service point of view, they're very, very efficient delivery. I mean, from their water-cooled data centers, they don't use air conditioning in data centers. It's all water-cooled, through to building building their own servers and repurposing their own servers. They had a great way of doing it. So that from a cost point of view, they would keep the basic infrastructure as a service very, very cheap, but they were slow to get into PaaS. They were really well, and they made some missteps too. vCloud Air, I think, was probably the biggest misstep they made in terms of thinking that they could pick up an awful lot of VMware customers that way and push out, and then basically VMware left them hanging, effectively. So I think I think if they stick to the knitting, if you like, that and their sort of mid-market, and to an extent, there's probably in public sector there is a market for from a sovereign data point of view for them. But if they're trying to go cheap and say they're cheaper, I mean, AWS can probably afford to ignore them at the moment. It's not a threat. But I think AWS, if they decided to turn their fire on them from a cost point of view, would make life very, very difficult for them. So yes, they are probably cheaper per instance at the moment, but it's not big enough market share for AWS to go, oh, that's a problem. If it was, they'd soon squash them.
Yeah, I mean, and looking at someone else like Nextcloud, which I think is German based. I mean, just looking at the products that they have, there's Nextcloud Files, so sync and share stuff, Groupware, so your calendar, contacts, email, Nextcloud Assistant, which is kind of a private, AI assistant. That's kind of your private GPT, chat GPT. Nextcloud Talk, which is kind of video conferencing and direct messaging and so on, and then Nextcloud Office, it's real-time document collaboration. So this is what I'm saying about kind of the services that you get in some of these are very packaged. They're a particular topic, like
Yeah.
office productivity or
Yeah.
file sharing, or your own private chat GPT kind of AI platform or assistant and things like that. Unlike, the kind of the floodgate of um, stuff that you get from AWS and others. We can just go in all sorts of crazy directions. Everything from sort of you're bringing your old crap monolithic applications into the public cloud, all the way to function as a service and serverless on the other end, right? So sure, you can maybe do some of these services in these kind of smaller players, and yeah, you can do things like sovereignty, as you said. There are areas to look at, so things like data sovereignty, or resource, you sort of have a sovereign cloud sort of approach, really. So whether that's kind of in the EU bloc or in the US or whatever it is, you can also achieve that.
Yeah, it's for me. We've sort of created our own problem by calling everything cloud. These are not what you were describing from Nextcloud is not really genuine cloud. It's
No,
it's
yeah,
applications. They're serving applications.
yeah.
They're
It's
not.
kind of it's the new version of managed services. It's kind of
Yes.
managing a service for
Yeah.
you. You have a SaaS
Yeah.
connection into it through your web browser or whatever, and that's it. And you just make use of
Yeah.
that.
I
I
mean,
mean, some of the others, like Sivo and I think some of the other players are offering even bare metal, right?
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, um, yeah, how many people would want to use that, and how does that work? Even at a PaaS layer, how many PaaS services are there, like database as a
Yeah.
service,
Yeah.
for
I
example?
mean, it's. I think if you look at the CSPs site, it's what, three databases
Mm,
that they mention. And they're the big one. That's fine. But I think it's a mid-market focus. It's a it's a small and mid-market focus. Uh, People thinking, I just want something that's a little less scary.
yes, and I mean, people like Nscale. So I was at the Cloud Summit a couple of months ago. I attended that in London. By the way, there's again a review of that coming up on the channel. If it's not out yet, do look out for that.
And that will have more than a PG rating as well, I think.
I'm sure it will. So at the Cloud Summit, was it Nscale? Can't remember the name. Nscale, I believe, presented. So Nscale is another of these sort of alternative clouds, and the guy was talking about come and run your generative AI models on our cloud. Fine. A lot of people are doing that. Even T Systems does that. We offer that service on our cloud. So you can certainly do that, right? But the point is how many people want to do that? How many people want to build their own LLM, platform and train and do all that kind of, inference and the RAG and all that stuff? Not many. I think how that market's going to go, as I wrote about earlier this year, I did an article on this, and I think Gartner kind of agrees to a point in terms of that, although the outcome is still yet to be seen because people are still doing proof of concepts and pilots so far of AI sort of projects and AI platforms. A lot of people are going to say, I love to use AI, but I'm not in the AI business. I don't want to train my own model. I don't want to, I just want to upload all my rubbish data into a model and let the model sort it out, and I can just use the model. So I would prefer to have a SaaS solution versus going and building my own and maintaining it and securing it and ensuring that the data is sovereign and blah, 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 blah.
It's interesting, they're not quite small smaller
Well, there is that as well. There's SLMs as well.
There's SLMs. It's somewhere in between, but there's the corporate language model, isn't there? And you say delivering the crap into them well, some people might say, actually, I really want very, very focused information, built on, coming back to our, data. discussion we've just had, if I've got an awful lot of data in there, why don't I just put that into a medium-sized model and get it to work? Yeah, because it's private. It's almost like your private language, your private model. How do I do that? So I think there are places where that could play. I mean, the one things that I think it was the Civo site that they were talking about, if you want to run, we can have GPU only capabilities, and
they all offer bare metal. Yeah,
yeah, and but you're sort of going again from a scale point of view. You're going to find it difficult. Are they the latest, greatest GPUs? Because we know there's a problem on delivery of
oh yes,
supply chain problems
yes,
on GPUs.
yes.
And you're going to find yourself being outbid, if you like, by Amazon and whoever,
Open AI and people like that. Yeah,
OpenAI, everybody else going for these
all the
GPUs,
other players. Yeah,
storing them all up. So, yes, you might be providing a second generation or third generation GPU, while the big boys are on seventh or eighth generation GPUs. It's that sort of problem I think they're going to face. There's a place for it, but and OVH Cloud I think have come as close as anybody. If you and we've sort of ignored Oracle Cloud and IBM's cloud to an extent. Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Because they're very much providing a service for their own existing customers,
Yeah, yeah.
despite everything that they've talked about. So, but I think OVH
That's quite
is interesting
incestuous.
as well. Is that they've relied on a certain French quirkiness, and the French love them. And you go to very enthusiastic sort of get-togethers of thousands of French developers, all thinking this is really, really wonderful. But outside that, they've struggled to really get traction.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, if they were to kind of go belly up tomorrow or something, I think the French government would be kind of I feel sorry for you, huh? Kind of that'll be their sort of approach.
Yeah, there would be a lot of sort of cries of anguish. It's a bit like when as English language has crept into the French language. And they've had this sort of society of trying to protect the French language. It's protect our local sort of cloud. I mean, you've got Gaia X. Look at Gaia X, which has really been sort of run into the into the ground. Really, it's a slow walking pace. It's just.
Yeah, but I mean, okay,
And
so
I think that's the challenge that they've tried lots of different ways to try think they can compete with the hyperscalers. The answer is you can't. Do something different.
yeah, and I have a different view on slightly different view on kind of the AI thing, because I think what's happening, and we're seeing this already, is that there's two things happening in that what I said earlier about sort of most people adopting a SaaS solution for their AI. There's now models that are appearing, or platforms that are appearing, that are sector specific, market specific. So there's like one for health, there's one for legal, there's one for manufacturing, there's one for marketing, there's one for food production, whatever.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So that's, I think, where those companies who want to use AI but don't want to do it themselves, they're not going to go to necessarily one of these alternative clouds, right? Because they don't have the tech savviness to go to the big three, but they also will not necessarily go to these alternative cloud players, because they're going to say, I just want to upload my data somewhere and start using it tomorrow. I want to upload it on the weekend, and on Monday I want to come in and start using it. And that's what I want to do. And the only way you're going to do that as quickly as that, not literally that quick, but faster than other ways of doing it, would be to put it into a SaaS model, not build your own and train it and customize and rag it and look after it and update it, and it's all open source and it's all over the place, and and so on. So that's one thing. The other thing is, a lot of the so-called open source models from the likes of Meta and so on are not open source. They're paying a lot of lip service to open source, but they're not. So buyer beware if you're going to look at that stuff. The third point is the likes of Mistral, Anthropic, and others. So these actual kind of really key players, and obviously even OpenAI, these really key players in the generative AI space, they've all had investments from Microsoft, from AWS, from Google, and others as well. So even they are now competing for those GPU resources.
Yeah.
And we have, and again, we've picked up on Intel, last time around and previously, when you had people like, Intel dragging their feet, they've been, I think one of the articles I read said Intel has been in the GPU market for 2 years and they've got zero to show for it. They had nothing. Only the Gaudi chips that they produced recently were kind of really their first foray, their first attempt into the proper sort of AI and GPU market. But again, too late. Nvidia's like a 3 trillion coming up to $4 trillion valuation company. They're well ahead of everybody. They're manufacturing their stuff for everyone. So now you're saying to me you want to put your chips on with your tools and everything else, and you want me to develop specifically for your chips versus the huge ecosystem that Nvidia has built up. So again, I just don't see how that's going to work, and I don't see how these alternative cloud providers can actually say, well, just we've got GPUs from Intel, or even if they get them from Nvidia, just bring all your stuff and build it on us. I don't want to build anything. I want to use it, but I don't want to build anything. That's the point.
Yeah, and those that do want to build something will go to AWS, or
because they're already in there.
It's already in there.
Microsoft will probably say, "Oh, just use our, OpenAI
Yeah.
and Azure Studio and
Yeah.
Bedrock from AWS."
It's the big weakness of the clouds is the wraparound of additional ecosystem stuff, let's call it that, is much less. So I mean they are glorified, application service providers. Is the way it's going to work.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Here
So no, that's fine. Yeah, no, I'm just so my phone was buzzing. So so I agree. So I think the future is not that rosy. I would still like them to be there because they do cater for certain type of customer and certain sort of things that customers maybe may want. So whether it's like sovereignty or I don't know, something like that. But they can't do, I mean, when the guys at Nextcloud, at Nscale, don't want to get the names wrong, Nscale at the Clouded Summit, when he said, "Oh, we have GPUs, so come and build your model on it," I was like, how many people want to do that? Even if you have like 100 customers who want to do that, yeah, I mean, what kind of they're SMEs. Or they're customers that don't know what they're necessarily doing. Like I said, everybody's still, still doing POCs and pilots, right? And they're slowly realizing that they can't really do this sort of stuff themselves. Because it was another article I picked up on this very topic that said, "Oh, people are moving their models, into private cloud because the public cloud is too expensive." Yeah, but they're going to find it equally difficult. And 2-3 months time, there's going to be another article saying, "Oh, doing it in private cloud is too much of a headache. Security, sovereignty, blah blah, blah, all that kind of stuff, is going to affect us again." And then eventually, I think they're going to come around to it in the second half of 2025. They're going to say, "SaaS, we should use SaaS. We should also put all us and just make sure that the SLA says yes, it's all sovereign and everything is only going to go out to the EU block or whatever, and we should just use SaaS." Because there's somebody actually doing it for our market sector.
I mean, you want to say to the sort of market sectors out there, that medium and small and medium-sized market that's out there, is SaaS equals software house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fundamentally what we're saying.
Yes.
It is. And there are people running SaaS-based services that have developed it from the old software applications they had. They've had to convert them to run as a SaaS service. It might not be genuine cloud as you and I know it, but it's as a service. And that's where these are going to survive. They're not going to survive trying to fight on the infrastructure as a service approach. They're not going to survive on the PaaS approach either.
Yeah.
So, and as you say, the ecosystems around the big hyperscalers now are such that it's, you need to find a specific industry application, make it a SaaS service, and sell the hell out of it that way.
Yeah. So I think my view is, and like I said, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of offering uh alternative solutions, and this sort of the David versus the Goliath kind of sort of thing.
And I think you and I have spoken about this in the past, that actually it needs some seismic shift in technology and or business model and or yeah, to get the dominance of the hyperscalers put under any sort of a threat at all. This
Yeah.
sort of incremental stuff, oh, you can run it on mine, compared to AWS or to Azure. It is, wishful thinking, guys. It
Yeah.
needs to be, there needs to be some sort of paradigm shift, either in technology terms or in business terms, that somebody sees and comes and says, oh, and the guys at, the hyperscalers do what happens to most companies is they're a little blindsided by something new coming along because they think they're invisible, invincible, not invisible. They probably think they're invisible as well,
As
but
well. Well, I mean, the certainly the the big three, hyperscalers are not invisible, because they had been dragged in front of the DAJ or CMA or whatever it is. And there was an article I think I picked up recently, which certain IT industry pundits also were using as a, see, everybody is repatriating from the public cloud. But if you're put in front of a government body or organization or committee or something, of course you're going to say that. Of course you're going to say, well, look, everybody's repatriating. Here's a survey or whatever, that says everybody's repatriating. So see, not everybody's with us, Mr. President, or or whatever. So I think, yeah, I think these public cloud providers, these alternative public cloud providers, have an identity crisis. They
yeah.
can't limp on from, oh, look, AI is happening, so let's offer some GPUs to everybody. Oh, look, XYZ is now trendy, let's offer that as a service. They need to find something that will say, this is what we do. We do it very well. We do it much better and cheaper than those guys, guaranteed. Come and put your stuff come and put your business or service that you want, come and make use of our cloud. And I think that will establish them as a real alternative. And they can be in a kind of a alliance, if you like, the Alternative Clouds Alliance or something. There you go. I've just invented the name for you guys. They can kind of all be together, all, standardize on some stuff like APIs, standardize on observability tools, standardize on, automation tools, infrastructure as code tools, and things like that. That would be really cool. That would really give them, and it will give customers an alternative. And what you'll start seeing happening is people like Nscale will merge with Nextcloud. Ionos will buy Leaf Cloud, and so on.
Yeah, and there's been various attempts over the years, not necessarily in cloud, for small and smaller players like that to try and first collaborate into some sort of federation or what it. And I've never seen one that's really worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And some of them will buy each other, buy one of the other ones in there. But fundamentally, getting them all with their own businesses to trust and work collaboratively with each other all the time, they can do it for a little while.
Yeah.
And there was a sort of with the sort of growth of Equinix and the growth of digital realty and people like that, some of the smaller ones tried to band together. Smaller co-location providers tried to band together into some sort of loose federation of, that they could offer the same sort of scale and network and all those things. and it just never took off
Never took off.
because they actually would slightly too competitive with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's
Indeed. Okay. We could go on talking, but I think we're way over time and out of time. That's for sure.
yeah.
Okay.
We've rattled on too long.
Indeed. Indeed. We've ranted for a long time, definitely. Okay. So, Paul, thank you ever so much for your time, input, comments, insights, and everything that you contribute to Class State of Play. This being the December episode, the last one of the year. Don't forget, there's a Christmas special coming out, so Paul will be there. But I very much appreciate all your
Old wine and mince pie in hand, I think.
Yeah. Something a little bit stronger, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, I really do appreciate all your input, or your time. I guess I wouldn't really have you on if I didn't really sort of appreciate that. I really do kind of get you on. So that's my compliment.
and I'd have stopped coming a long time ago if I didn't thoroughly enjoy the fact it keeps me young, I suppose. Just like my daughters keep my music taste reasonably young.
Oh my God. Okay, we won't go into that.
You're keeping my technology young and up to date, I think. Otherwise, this old mainframe guy would wither away. So it's quite fun. It's quite fun.
Cool. Okay. Well, I take my hat off. If I had a hat on, I'd be taking it off for you right now. So I do appreciate that. No, that's fine. All the links to Paul's stuff and what he gets up to when he's not on the Cloud Therapist channel will be in the description of the video. You mentioned a few, so we're going to drop those in as well. Links to everything else that we've talked about, and then some. Again, all of that in the description of the video. Please do check those out, because I do cram it full. I wish I could do some more. Sometimes it goes into the comments because YouTube will not allow me the number of characters that I need in the description. So I have to actually put it in the comments of the video. So do check those out as well. And yeah, let us know what you think about the topics that we discussed. Are you engaging in any of them right now? Yeah, please drop us some comments on the video. Give us your thoughts about any other topics that you want us to look at in 2025, anything that's upcoming that might be of interest to you. Wishing you all a great December and Christmas time, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.